Entering the fantasy football season, here's a few tight ends I think will be bust this season. The first guy, TJ Hockenson, the Detroit Lions. So Hockenson last year going into many fantasy leagues, he was going early third or fourth round, but this year you just can't count on him, I think, here once again with injuries throughout his career and Jared Goff is his quarterback having trouble getting the ball to TJ Hockenson last year. 61 catches, 583 receiving yards, and only 4 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. So right now, I know last season, St. Brown was the big breakout guy in that Detroit Lion offense. But Hockenson, a lot of teams rolled their coverage towards him, and they did a great job of it. Last season, coming into the league as a top 5 tight end, maybe even top 3. Right now in fantasy drafts, he's going anywhere from the 6th to the 8th round range here. But I think there's tight ends this season that could have the same type of season as a TJ Hockenson, or even better, depending their ADP compared to him. Like a Gerald Everett I like this year, a Mike Gesicki, even a Tyler Higbee I think could have a better or the same type of year as Hockenson. So right now, on a bad Detroit Lion team, last year having a bust season, I think once again Hockenson has another season where he's a bust. And it's not all his fault, obviously. If you don't have a quarterback that could get the ball to you in the right spots on the field, it's going to be a tough year, and that's exactly going to be the case once again, I think, here for Hockenson, where defenses are going to try to lock him down, and let's see what type of weapons Goff has besides St. Brown on the outside that could try to make plays and beat them. But right here, I think Hockenson, once again, is going to be a vocal point for defenses to stop, and a guy that's not going to get the job done and be a bust once again this season. The next tight end's David Njoku with the Cleveland Browns. So right now, we know Austin Hooper's gone and in free agency and went to the Tennessee Titans. After they cut him loose was the Browns. And last season for Njoku, a guy who's been hot and cold throughout his career. He could have a monster game, 20 fantasy points. Next week, you go out there, pick him up, and the next 2 weeks, he does nothing, and then once again, he gets going. But now, with Deshaun Watson suspended 11 games here, Jacoby Brissett is going to be the quarterback, and his best seasons are behind him, and he's a guy that's had trouble over the last few years getting the ball to his tight ends and wide receivers. So last year for Njoku, 36 catches, 475 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. Right now, he's going anywhere from the 10th to the 12th round in most fantasy leagues. And he's a guy I'm just going to avoid altogether, especially with Watson suspended, and especially with the Jekyll and Hyde performances here from Njoku. So if someone wants to get him at tight end, that's great, but there's many tight ends I'd rather have over him in that same area of your drafts. I'd rather have a Pat Freiermuth, obviously, than him. Gerald Everett, Mike Gesicki, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry. So there's a bunch of guys. Irv Smith Jr., Njoku, I don't think he gets the job done. And this Browns offense as a whole just doesn't have many weapons besides Nick Chubb's pretty much the only guy I would look to draft for fantasy this season here. Everyone else is either going to be a bust or non-existent for fantasy owners. Next tight end's Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. So last season, Fant, had a lot of hype around him as a top 10 tight end coming into the year. Now going from a decent Bronco offense, even though I know Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback over last year, to now a Seattle Seahawks offense with either Geno Smith starting or obviously a Drew Lock. That's not a recipe for success, in my opinion, here for Noah Fant. Last season, 68 catches, 670 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. It was a serviceable fantasy year here for him. But this year in Seattle, I don't see him doing much. And he's another guy who's been in and out of games a lot last season, where you get hurt, come back, not do much, and then some games where he does nothing at all for fantasy owners. So right now, he's going towards the end of fantasy drafts here, and it's going to be another season and a long season, I think, for Noah Fant, where honestly, he's the 3rd or 4th option on that offense anyway, with a DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and a Rashad Penny and Kenny Walker out of the backfield. So right now, Noah Fant, I don't think he's going to do much here in Seattle. He's a tight end that's going to be a bust once again this year, and I'll let someone else deal with him. Next guy's Evan Engram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jaguars overpaid for some playmakers on their offense this season, but it doesn't mean these guys are going to do anything for fantasy football or even be that productive for the Jaguars. So Engram, the last few seasons with the Giants, he was a disappointment and a bust for fantasy. And I'm going to go that route once again where he's going to be a bust. Last year, 46 catches, 408 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, and a fumble loss here for Evan Engram. So this year, maybe he'll hit 500 yards, maybe he'll have 4 or 5 touchdowns. But another guy going last couple rounds of fantasy drafts here, I'm not going to count on him. I'm not going to expect much out of him. And yeah, he had a lot of hype coming out of college, but he just hasn't lived up to the hype in the NFL. And once again, he's going to be a bust, in my opinion, here is Evan Engram. And the final tight end, I think, will be a bust this year, CJ Uzomah. Here, he was a very solid fantasy option last year, I believe, Uzomah, especially in the second half of the year with the Cincinnati Bengals. But now he cashed in with a good deal with the New York Jets. And hey, who could blame him? If you want to get the bag, you go out there and get the bag. So last season, 49 catches, 493 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. But like I said, the second half of the year is where Uzomah did his damage. But now he takes a big backseat in fantasy football, going from a high-powered offense with a good quarterback in Joe Burrow to now going to a New York Jet team that's not known for their offense for many seasons here. Now already Zach Wilson banged up with a knee injury, even though he possibly could be ready for week 1 here. It's just a bad situation in New York. I don't like many of their players on that offense for fantasy football. Yeah, the Jets still have some games where they're going to have to put up points and get a lot of garbage time points, but CJ Uzomah was in a better spot, obviously, in Cincinnati in terms of fantasy football than he is in New York. So right now, with him going to the Jets, his fantasy value definitely takes a hit. And he's a tight end that's going to be a bust this season, I think. So that's a few tight ends I would avoid to draft, and I think will be busts here entering fantasy leagues in the next couple weeks in the season.